currently recording this session so that I can upload it on YouTube, and those who missed the session can watch it there. So, is Group 3 ready na to present?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sige. So, sige, without further ado, let's welcome Group 3 in their presentation. Yay! Plakpakan sila. Virtual clap.
Alright, so hello everyone. Good morning. So, kamusta kamo guys? Pumahaw na kamo or nakatulog man kamo sa mayo last night? Well, I guess everyone are ready na no with our class today. So for today, we will going to discuss to you guys. We will also going to share our different researches with the topic psychology of religion and cult. And I know this is one of interesting topic good for our subject. But with our before we will going to proceed with our formal discussion, I understand nga subong nga time it's very katuluyo gid. So before kami mag-start someone formal discussion, I will turn you over guys to Miss Binyas for our very short energizer.
So, hi guys. Good morning sa inyo tanan. So, before ta mag-start sa our energizer, may ara kita ginawag nga ay yoga. So, kita gid ni ang ay yoga kay ang atong energizer subong patalas ta mata guys. So, ay yoga first, we need to rub our eyes pero dapat hinay lang guys. So, I suggest everyone if okay sa inyo, please open cam. If okay lang sa inyo guys. Okay. So, naka-open ng iban. If okay lang sa inyo guys. Okay. Okay, if nahiya ka mo, then, okay, so, I will yoga first. You need to rub our eyes, pero dapat hinay lang, just like this, guys. Okay, circular motions, guys, ha? Okay. And then, may dayan, guys, so. Though ginakuso ta siya, pero hindi ang tudo-tudo, guys. Okay. Next is, malo kita sa right side, just like this. And then sa left side, and then up, and then down. Right, left, up, down. Right, left, up, down. And then guys, like kung paano tabla magpaturong, duka mo na guys. 1, 2, 3, duga mo na. Okay, get guys, okay, liwat. So left, right, up, down, dayan paturong. 1, 2, 3, go. Left, right, up, down, then paturong. Paturong, liwat naman, left, right, up, down, paturong, paturong. Okay, so ma-proceed na ta sa aton ni energizer na i-present sa aton ni Det. So,
Email, next slide na please. Thank you. So, just to loosen up a bit, we have prepared an icebreaker. We call this icebreaker as the Stroop color and word test. So before we begin, I encourage our participants to unmute yourselves to give your answers. Unmute na kamo guys. So ang mechanics is you must say the color of the word but not the name of the word. Nag-gets nyo. Ang color ang ihambalon nyo, hindi ang name sa word.
Gets.
Okay.
Yes.
So, ma-start na kita. Email please. Next slide.
Hello.
Okay, very good. So, next. Green.
Green.
Haha. Very good. Okay, final na ni ha.
Red.
Red.
Green.
Green.
Okay.
Red.
Next slide, please.
Orange.
Orange.
And last,
Red.
Red.
ay, next slide.
Orange.
Orange. Blue.
Blue.
Next, Neil.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Gail, sa pag-participate.
All right. So thank you, Zai, and thank you, Det, for the very short energizer. So to formally start with our discussion, together with me, of course, are my members, Miss Erica Bonitilio, Miss Dyla Faye Binyas, Miss Mary Grace Bubungan, and of course, Mr. Emil Cabantog. Okay, let's start because I guess na-prepare ng inyo eyes with the eyeball yoga, no? So let's go start with the presentation.
Neil, next slide. So, good morning, everyone. I am Mary Grace, and I will be discussing about psychology of religion. Next slide. So first, what is religion? Religion is a set of organized beliefs, practices, and systems that most often relate to belief and worship of a controlling force such as a personal god or another supernatural being. So ari na diri ang aton mga practices like ga-pray kay Lord, ga-simba, and ga-worship. Kay ginapatihan nga paagi diri may ara communication kay God or ara personal connection sa iya. Next, psychology of religion. So it is a modern field of study in which the concepts and methods of psychology are applied to religious experience and behavior. So karon madiscuss man da namon ang mga lain-lain nga views sa mga psychologists about religion and by mga researches man. So, ang question gid, why do people believe in a religion? So, believers believe in a religion because it is self-evident that God exists. So, people believe because they communicate with it and perceive evidence of its involvement in the world. So, believers encountered religious experience, which refers to the conviction or sensation that we are connected to the divine. So, this type of communion might be experienced when people pray or meditate. Next, religion may feel the human need for finding meaning, sparing us from existential angst while also supporting social organization. So, believers who were raised in a deeply evangelical household, ginatudloan gina sila sang ila parents to pray daily and that the purpose and meaning of life were found in God. So, in life, under human condition, damo kita na problema nga ma-encounter, damo uncertainties. Di ang religion daw amo ni siya bala ang isa ka device for us to retreat from painful situations. Amo na nga ga-pray kay Lord nga maghatag siya sang guidance. Also, religion helps in building values like love, empathy, respect, and harmony. Next, religion is a byproduct of the way our brains work, growing from cognitive tendencies to seek order from chaos. So religion is a system of oppression designed to fend off and para i-control ang wild individual desires kag urges nga ga-threaten sa society. So amo na ni nag-exist ang religion no since human nature is animalistic and destructive in its core. It is necessarily for societies to develop civilizing systems to prevent chaos. So ang next topic will be discussed by Bonitilio.
So we have here the five major religions in the world. Although there are other different religions na ginapractice sa bilog na kalibutan, amo niya siyang five ang considered to be the oldest religions and They are generally described as the main world religion. So I will just briefly discuss these five major religions. So first we have Christianity. So it is the most widespread, most practiced, and most known religion. So ang Christianity, they have different denominations and they also differ on the way they worship. So Christianity is a monotheistic religion, meaning followers believe that there is only one true God. And Christians believe in the Holy Trinity, represented by the divinity of the Father, which is a God, the Son, which is a Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. The central text of the Christian faith is the Bible, which includes important scriptures about the teachings ni Jesus Christ, the lives and teachings of major prophets and disciples, and it also offers instructions about how Christians should live. So Christians believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah and the one that was sent by God to earth as a man and was crucified on the cross to save people from their sins. And they also believe that about second coming in which Jesus will return to earth and take Christian believers to heaven with him. Second, we have Islam. Islam is the second largest religion in the world. So Muslim is the term for people who follow the Islamic religion. Islam is also a monotheistic religion, parehas ang Christianity, and they believe in Allah as one true God. So Islam teaches that Allah's word was revealed to Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Muhammad is Allah's final messenger. So they also believe na damo nga prophets ang ginsent to teach Allah's law and gina-respect Manila ang some prophets sang Jews and Christians including kay Abraham, Moses, Noah, and Jesus. But for Muslims, they contend that Muhammad was the final prophet. So Islamic places of worship are referred to as mosques. The followers of Islam are required to fast during the month of Ramadan because they believe that Ramadan teaches them to practice self-discipline, self-control, sacrifice, and during these times, gina-aim nila to grow spiritually and to be close to Allah. So ang Ramadan, nag-occur na siya on the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. So fasting during the Ramadan means abstinence from all food or drink, including water. So that is from sunrise to sunset. And they eat pre-fast meal known as suhoor after the sunrise and they break their fast with iftar after the sunset. And the Quran is the major holy text of Islam. So third, we have the Hinduism. Hinduism is regarded by some as the world's oldest religion. Brahman is the recognized supreme deity responsible for creating everything in the universe, but they also believe in other Hindu deities like Shiva and Vishnu. So Hindus believe in reincarnation with a constant cycle of being born, living, and dying on the path of enlightenment or the samsara. And nagabelieve man sila sa karma, which is the universal law of cause and effect. So rather than a single religious book, Hinduism has a number of sacred texts, including the Vedas, the Samhitas, the Upanishads, the Ramayana, and the Bhagavad Gita. Next, we have the Buddhism. Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, who later became known as Buddha. Followers of Buddhism doesn't worship Buddha as a god, so gina-consider lang nila si Buddha as an extraordinary being or man who discovered enlightenment. The primary focus of Buddhism is to seek enlightenment, which is a state of inner peace and wisdom. So Buddhists often meditate because it is like a mental training for them or for their minds to become, and that is the key to attain enlightenment. So Buddhists also follow a path of moral living, thinking, and behavior as well as seeking wisdom. But there are some scholars who don't recognize Buddhism as an organized religion, but rather a way of life or a spiritual tradition. So last we have the Judaism. Judaism is the oldest monotheistic religion. So Jewish people believe that there's only one God who has established a covenant or a special agreement with them. So, para sa ila, their God communicates to believers through prophets like Abraham and Moses. And it is also the first ethno-religious groups to move away from idolatry or paganism. So they worship in holy places known as synagogues, and their spiritual leaders are called rabbis. So amo na siyang symbol sang Judaism ang six-pointed star of David. So most Jews believe that their Messiah hasn't come yet but will one day. So the primary holy text of Jewish faith is the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible. So today it includes the same books as the Old Testament, the Christian Bible, though they are different in order, and also Ten Commandments play an important role in the teachings of Judaism. So if you want to know more about these religions, we have provided our reference at the last slide. Next.
So, some psychologists have characterized religious beliefs as pathological, seeing religion as a malignant social force that encourages irrational thoughts and ritualistic behaviors. So, isa na diri sa ila si Freud. So, according to him, religion was an illusion, a form of neurosis, and even an attempt to gain control over the external world. So in his book, The Future of an Illusion, Freud wrote that religion is comparable to a childhood neurosis. So Freud holds that religion is an illusion aimed at managing man's emotional needs going back to early childhood. So for him, religion is just a childhood needs of security and forgiveness. So ang important kinadi nga part sa nga ginsulat ni Freud sa The Future of an Illusion is that he ties the development of religion with the Oedipal complex. God, like the father, serves to salvage the child's sense of helplessness against nature and fear of death. So the father, or si God, offers the illusion of wish fulfillment in exchange na magsunod ka sa iya, mag-obey, or magpasugot nga kontrolo niya ka or subjection. So para matupad ang imo nga wish, kailangan mo maging obedient or being subjected. Kay muna, gapati ka nga siya lang gid makagrant sang imo nga wish. So for Freud, ang wish fulfillment amo gini ang base sang religion's illusion. So Freud's psychoanalytic perspective views religion as the unconscious mind's need for wish fulfillment. Kay ang mga tawo need nila security and i-free ila selves sa ila own guilt. So gapati si Freud na people choose to believe in God. Kay ga-represent siya as a powerful father figure. Next kay Victor naman. So the notion of God of supra-meaning, as Frankl sometimes refers to God, is one of the major thematic concepts underpinning his logotherapy. So ang logotherapy was developed by Victor. The theory is founded on the belief that human nature is motivated by the search for a life purpose. So he established the presence of a unique antecedent, which he refers to as the unconscious God. So ang unconscious God refers to a hidden relationship with a hidden God. So Frankl borrows the term unconscious from the Freudian vocabulary. Pero para kay Frankl, ang term nga na diri is built-in prior orientation, which is not something acquired through the actions or choices of existence. To put it roughly, the unconscious God is inside the person and part of the person's structure as a human being. So God is called unconscious, kaya ang aton existence wala ni siya ability to invent, control, or eliminate this innate, built-in, a priori orientation to God. So para kay Frankl, the unconscious God is the pre-given goal of the will to meaning kung sa diin, amo ni ang naga-orient and naga-direct sa existence, hindi nga ang existence ang naga-direct sa unconscious God. So kay Jung naman, when Jung talk about God, he is really talking about the God within, the self. So do similar ni sila ni Frankl, He was once asked if he believed in God. He answered, I don't believe, I know. Thus, Jung made an act of faith in the existence of collective unconscious and archetypes, and he interpreted Christianity in the light of his belief. So, to Jung, religion was the symbolic expression of life's meaning. Yung propose nga it is impossible kuno to achieve optimum psychological health kung ang consciousness wala intrapsychic connection sa regulating religious factors. So for example, ang mga psychologically healthy individuals, kabalo ni sila mag-make decision nga based sa tsakto or ginapag-isipan gid. Also, Jung understood the relevance of the Christian story in its ever-living symbolic power and truth. So, Jung thought of life and death of Christ as happening now, always. So, the self-sacrifice of Jesus in his death is the eternally present in this timeless dimension of our lives. For example, the death of the ego and the resurrection of a new I, the death in seeming failure and the resurrection in a new hope and a new way of life. So, kumbaga, na-fail ka subong. And after some failure nga naka-learn ka. Or okay ang life mo subong, then someday, basi may matabo nga malain. Or feeling mo hopeless ka, and then may maabot nga new hope. So, amo na, tanan kita ga ka-experience na. So, Jung invented the idea of and believed in archetypes. He thought that we are born with archetype of God, an image which we are all predisposed to having. Jung provides evidence for this by referring the fact na diskan damo-damo na bala religion nga nag-exist, tanani sila nag-share common core ideas like strong infallible figures, rules, tradition, etc. Next slide. So, neural underpinning and pro-social factors of religion. So, neuroscience research supports the idea that the brain is primed to believe. So, the idea that got a lot of attention several years ago that there's a God spot in the brain where religious thoughts and feelings arise. Pero gin-reject ni siya. However, in 2009, si Grafman nag-publish siya sang fMRI study showing that religious thoughts activate the area of the brain involved in deciphering other people's emotions and intentions, the ability known as the theory of mind. So, in the study of 40 people, si Grafman and his colleagues, nakita nila nga when people heard phrases like God's will guides my actions and God's protects, may ara areas ang ila brain nga parts ng theory of mind lit up. So, this study was also supported when a Danish team saw the same brain areas activate when religious participants prayed. So, another research was the work of psychologist Michael Inslick. The-focus naman ni siya sa brainwave generated by anterior cingulate cortex called error-related negativity or ERN, which spikes when people make mistakes. It is our cortical alarm bell, an "uh-oh" response that is preconscious and emotional. When we make an error, it's arousing, causing slight anxiety. So sa study naman na diri ni Islake gali, din-measure niya ang oo response in people who performed a standard color naming stroke task. So, ang icebreaker namon kaina amo na di ang gin-perform sa mga participants. So, bisan tanan nga participants nagsala, the ERN firing was less strong in people who are more religious. So, according kay Inslick, religious believer are calmer and more graceful under pressure. Um, so why does religion influence a person's behavior? So religion allows people to live in a large cooperative societies. So in particular, ang religion amo ni ang naga-encourage sa mga tao to be more charitable by promoting belief in supernatural agent. Kumbaga, mas nagahatag sila kwarta or mas naging pro-social sila tungod sa influensang religion. And lastly, religion in a sense outsources social monitoring to a supernatural agent. So, if you believe in a monitoring God, even if no one is watching you still have to be pro-social because God is watching you. So, kay di ba ang iban, maayon lang sila mag-ubra kung may gatulok, kung may ara kamera, kung damo tawo. Pero kung wala na, gapabaya naman sila. Pero if you are a true believer and you believe that God is watching you, bisan wala pa na may nagabantay sang hulag mo or sang obrahon mo, pero may magud Japon obrahon kung ano ang insakto sa mata sang Ginoo. Next slide.
Okay, so next we have the need for meaning or a framework for the psychology of religion. So this framework is from the book of Ralph Hood, the fifth edition of Psychology of Religion. So this suggests that the cognitive, motivational, and the social aspects of finding meaning in life offers us the direction for understanding the role of religion in human life. And it must also be acknowledged that not all people attempt to find meaning of life through religion. So for some, including those who have tried religion and found it unfulfilling, they found a subjective sense of meaning through other means other than religion. So of course we have different concepts and definition of meaning in terms of what really matters in our life. So according to Ralph Hood and colleagues, search for meaning is of central importance to human functioning and that religion is uniquely capable of helping in that search. So the need to make sense of things is characteristics of every human being and it is one of the factors that affect human functioning. So psychologists like Frankel and Stedrick consider it to be vital part of mental processes and behavior and it also enables individuals to interpret and organize their daily experiences and how they achieve goals and categorize important things. So religious systems provide individuals with an integrated set of beliefs, goals, and meanings which can be used in explaining the complexities of the world and dealing with personal situations or problems. So we have cognitive search for meaning. When we look at cognition, we discover that people are active meaning making teachers. So, according to Dr. Frankel, the search for meaning is the primary intrinsic motivation of human beings, meaning it is natural for us to find some explanation about some things. And we don't really create meaning, instead, we find it. So we keep on asking questions like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Or what do our lives mean to us? So the struggle with existential questions and the corresponding search for answers sometimes lead individuals to religion. So there are some studies that have been conducted which repeatedly show that religion can be a powerful source of meaning in life. Some of you may be familiar with the book The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, but it is considered to be the best selling book, of course, aside from the Bible. And maybe it is safe to assume that all mentally capable people, not just those who are religious, struggle at some point to comprehend what life is all about. And people also need to find their particular niche or position in the world. Researchers who study the psychology and neuroscience of religion are helping to explain that religion may in fact be a byproduct of the way our brains work. So growing from cognitive tendencies to seek order from chaos, to anthropomorphize our environment and to believe the world around us was created for our use. So next we have the motivational search for meaning or the need for control. The study of motivation and finding meaning focuses us on the need of people to exercise control over themselves and their environment. So one that is particularly intriguing and of heuristic value to psychologists of religion is that meaning helps meet perhaps an even greater underlying need for control. That need for control drives people to turn to the external world in order to find things they can control. So it is a control in the sense of power. When we are threatened with harm or pain, we tend to seek or predict or control the outcomes of the events that can affect us. So it may be that people gain some sense of control by making sense of what is happening and being able to predict what will occur, even if the result is undesirable. So just when we hear people who are giving a bad or negative results of health prognosis, so they still somehow felt relieved because at least they now know something and they are not left wondering. So when attempts at control are limited, religious faith alone may provide an illusory, subjective sense of control to help people regain the feeling that they are doing something that may work. For example, when someone close to us are sick or dying, or there are some situations that we cannot control or do anything about it, di ba we turn into our religion or faith in terms of praying or by doing some rituals. So by praying and doing rituals, we somehow feel that we are doing something to change or to somehow control a particular situation. So an argument can be made that religious rituals and prayer are mechanisms for enhancing the sense of self-control and the control of one's world. So this enhanced subjective feeling of control is often capable of offering people the strength they need to succeed. And also, our emphasis on the cognitive and motivational aspects of the search for meaning should not be taken to mean that the search itself is conducted in isolation of others. So, diri na masulod si social embeddedness of meaning or the need for relationship. Social life, which we encapsulate in the concept of sociality, recognize that people necessarily exist within relationship. So not only they must relate to others to survive and prosper, but it is often through the relational selves that meaning is discovered. In short, people need people, and it is through others that a sense of meaning is often most fully experienced. Religion fosters social group unity, which further strengthens religious sentiments. So according to Pargament, church members possess larger social support networks than those who are not involved in church. Maybe some of you can relate that when we have a certain affiliation in church or kung may congregation kita, ang atong social relationship naga-widen man. Like we have a lot of people we know and there are a lot of people we can connect with. So religion connects individuals to each other and their groups and it socializes members into community. The religious affiliation opens important social channels for interpersonal approval and integration into society on many levels. The search for meaning is not one-sided and that the psychology of religion is also focused upon the response to what may be perceived as ultimately real. So the search for meaning to our existence is an important and universal human need. So it is also a vital part of how we evaluate the worth of our own lives. So many people find in religious beliefs a sense of purpose, understanding, and psychological support. Next slide, please.
So next is the criteria for a psychological interpretation of religiosity. So there are four criterions. So the first criterion arises from the consideration that every single deed has to be contextualized within the person's all other deeds, just as the person with all her function turns out to be related with others and with the whole. So it also means that an intention underlies each deed, and therefore every correct interpretation requires the need to remain faithful to the intentional meaning of the person that attributes to it. So the actual deed does not matter, but it is mas importante nga mas maintindihan ang intention sang person para ma-accomplish niya kung anong iya nga uh, kung anong iya gina-achieve kag ang iya goal, and also what other behaviors he or she refers to kag ang factors nga nag-facilitate para amo tong mapili niya nga choice. So the second criterion emerges from the fact that religiosity is not something separate from the whole of human experience, but it is a set within a horizon of wholeness and integrity, amounting, or according to the appropriate phrase used by Alport, to a unifying philosophy of life. So, as a consequence, believers give an ultimately religious meaning to all the activities. For example, their work, either be as a sportsman or a job, or a political commitment. So, amo na ang naga-frame sang ila choices ng ginaubra, ano ila plano, ang plano nila ang gina-workout, kag ang and the limitations they show within a religious perspective. So obviously, bearing in mind the various stages of their own psychophysical growth to maturity. Next is the third criterion, is the dynamic development through which every religious behavior is created along with the person, being bound to his or her own history and at the same time to the broader history that affects the whole of humankind and is reflected with understandable diversifications in every moment of the evolution of individuals and of the group they belong to. So this gives rise to a double level of manifestation of every evolutionary or genetic aspect of religiosity. So the first level is related to the reality and stresses the fact that there is an evolution that keeps pace with the chronological, spiritual, and social growth. So it also justifies questions such as can a person not fully developed from the physiological point of view be held capable of a moral behavior? Or is it possible to be holy during the childhood or the pre-adolescence when we are far from achieving autonomy and responsibility? So the second level is related to the chances and emphasizes the fact that there is also a logical evolution, not necessarily chronological, in each or hope of our own history, on which basis one recognizes that it is possible to move towards more mature forms of religiosity. So the fourth criterion emerges from the fact that one cannot demand a psychological interpretation of the religious attitude, leaving aside the meaning that it acquires in a given historical context. So, for example, the rise and development of individuals' religiosity differ in a mainly Catholic or either Islamic cultural context. So, the religious setup is different in a historical moment, considering the experience of faith as an undoubted reference point. So there is a great difference in terms of religious dynamics between a country with a long tradition founded on the doctrine and other country, or one of a country where the gospel has only been proclaimed in a recent century and which therefore shows a different cultural and historical intensity. So one cannot fail to consider the social expectations centered on that life experience in a certain traditional religious context. So obviously, a different point of view applies to where society or uh, the context have now become secular and no longer value such significant events. So next are the current trends. First is the faith of Filipinos amidst COVID-19 pandemic. So more than 400,000 Catholics in the Philippine capital celebrated on Saturday where a feast for a centuries-old wooden statue of Jesus Christ despite health experts warning it could turn into a super spreader event for coronavirus. So ang meaning of feast is ang pista ng itim na Nazareno. So may iban gid nga mas king cancel ang amo nga feast or ang pesta nga ni may ibang nga nagkatugay kitungod gapati gid nga once ma-attend sila ang ilabala faith sa Ginoo mo nang ginabase nila na tungod makadto mo na ay At kami protect kami sa COVID muna kay grabe ang pagtuon nila sa ito na Nazareno. So pero may ibang gid nga like faithful believers man nga nagstay lang sila balay tungod gin ano na lang for their safety purposes. Naglantaw na lang sa mga live stream, sa mga broadcast sa TV. So next is the impact of COVID-19 on church gatherings in the Philippines. So when the pandemic started in the Philippines, the Philippine government responded by calling together the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Diseases, or the IATF, and declared the Philippines in a state of calamity. So, and as far as religious activities were concerned, mass gatherings with explicit mention of religious gatherings were prohibited from most areas. So the churches responded by following the guidelines of the IATF, such as shifting worship to online platforms and through televising masses and limiting church capacity. So tungod ng COVID, bawal ang mga mass gatherings, especially sa mga church, sa mga events and everything. Ang mga church nakaisip agad sa paraan. So sa una may arat naman siguro na gina-broadcast sa TV ang mga misa sa online. So bali mas nag-shift pagid sila to more accessible platforms para lang ma-continue sang mga Filipinos nga mag-ano sang faith nila sa Ginoo nga hindi bala madula. Maskin tungod sa pandemic mas sige-sige gyapon. So Filipino faith perseveres despite pandemic restrictions. So COVID-19 has changed the Filipino concept of devotion from wiping images with handkerchief and touching them with their hands. The pandemic has made people's faith firm and steadfast with prayer and solitude. So during this time of syempre sa buong pandemic, Filipinos and all churchgoers around the world are called to return to the depths of their hearts and believe that what matters are not external manifestation of faith, but what lies within. So maski naman hindi ka mag-church or anything or mag-attend sa mga pista about sa mga saints, pero kung ano ang imo faith sa ang pagtuo mo sa Ginoo, kung ano ganyang ara sa imo heart, amo ginayapon nang magpas ng tense ang imo pagtuo. So the next topic will be discussed by Miss Bilbao and Miss Binyas, the psychology of cult.
So the psychology of cult. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is a cult? So a cult is defined as a small group of people who have similar religious beliefs or routines that others view as bizarre or sinister. A cult is also a group or movement with a shared pledge to an extreme ideology that is typically embodied by a charismatic leader. So in simple words, kumbaga, ang cult, it is an excessive admiration for a particular person. Next is to the elements and objectives of cults. So cults have a belief system that has the answers to all of life's questions and offers a special solution to be gained only by following the leader's rules. The charismatic leader is the originator of the group. So in order to be part of the group, you have to go through a transformational process which they dictate to you and you can't be there otherwise. So as this process goes on, the person begins to adopt this new worldview that requires new behaviors and which most often requires cutting off from the past. Cutting off the past includes your all religious beliefs and even your behavior. So then there are the more subtle influences, which is the peer pressure. So older members will model for the new members how you're supposed to behave. So sa charismatic leaders, ginagamit nila ang ilang personality and charm to attract followers. So ga-follow sila sa pyramidal type na pattern wherein ang early members ng cult, i-attract nila ang newer ones. Kumbaga diyan na sila sang pag-build sang cult frame. Ang mga cult members kani, they are skilled on who to target. Ga-focus sila sa mga tao nga who have undergone personal or professional loss. So because of loneliness, it'll be easier for them para hikayaton ka nga mag-join sa ilang group. So next slide please. The historical basis and development of cults. The word cult originates from early 17th century from the Latin word cult meaning worship, inhabited, and cultivated. From the 19th century to the present, the word cult began to be associated with any religion or denomination other than Christianity. The modern day adoption of the word involves a group that has charismatic leader who may be worshipped. In the present day application of the word that is extended to refer to a group of people with an overzealous interest in a celebrity, non-mainstream band, game, book, or movie. In fact, many religions began as cults, but as they grew larger in society, they became known as bona fide religions rather than cults. By the way, these are called the new religious movement kag form sang folk Catholicism. So one example is of course ang Rizalistas diri sa Philippines. The relationship between pagan worship and cult worship. The term pagan comes from the Latin paganus, which refers to those who live in the country. Pagans have been broadly defined as anyone involved in any religious act, practice, or ceremony which is not Christian. So pagans believe that there is divinity in the living world, and through rituals they can connect with the divine. The difference between paganism and cultism is that paganism is indigenous and polytheistic religions, while cultism is the system or practice of cult. Always remember nga pagans, ga-worship sila sa nature and earth, just like the babaylans, while ang cults naman, ga-worship sila sa particular person. So next slide please. Cults by number, so ang present context of cults, the identified cults in the world and in the Philippines. So ang identified ged nga cults diri sa Philippines is ang Rizalist cult, namely the Iglesia Sagrada ni Lahi or the Holy Church of the Race, Banner of the Race Church, Iglesia Watawat ng Lahi, Cadena de Amor, Universal Rizalista Brotherhood Association, Knights of Rizal, and Tutupad Ka Patriots or the TKPI. Yes, divine ang kay Kiboloy Pagid. So, Rizalista is a religious movement that is adopted by numerous ethnic religious groups in the Philippines that believe in the divinity of Jose Rizal. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority in 2010, the population of Rizal had increased by 800,000. So far, upon searching, wala pagid sang record ang PSA sa present gid nga population sang mga Rizalistas. So ginbutang ko is Rizalistas, it's because Rizalista is the pinaka-popular gid nga cult dire sa Philippines. So next is the cults around the world. By the way, Rizalistas believes in Rizal, kag gapati sila nga Rizal is still alive and will return to deliver his followers from poverty and oppression. So ang headquarters ng sektor sa Rizalistas is makitaan sa Calamba, Laguna. Next is the cults around the world. So the NXIVM, Children of God, the Manson family, Heaven's Gate, the family, True Russian Orthodox, Angel's Landing, Church of the Lamb of God, People's Temple, Branch Davidians, Sinanon, Om Shinrikyo, the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, Order of the Solar Temple, Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter and the Day Saints Church. So there are more cults than ever before with more members. Three research studies indicate that there are 3,000 to 5,000 groups in every area of the United States and throughout the world. Experts estimate that 6 to 10 million people have recently been involved with cults. By the way, guys, ang mga kulto nga ginbutang ko, these cults have made headlines around the world since they are known as the deadliest or dangerous cults. So, some stories sa mga cults are quite disturbing. Just like sa NXIVM, wherein ang founder nga si Keith Rainier, he was accused of running an abusive sex cult sa Albany-based seminar company niya. Gin-deny niya ang charges sa but sang 2018 gin-arrest sa. And then, ang judge nag-order nga i-held siya without bail until trial. Pero before pa na i-arrest si Rainier, sa 2017 nga daan, ang New York Times gin-expose na nila ang NXIVM nga kumbaga may fronting cult pagid sila bala nga ginatawag nga ang DOS or the Vow. So gin-report sang New York Times nga ang mga female member nga sang cult sang NXIVM, they were branded tapos ginahimo sila nga sex slaves, and if hindi sila magpati, ginapunish sila or blackmail sila sang ilang nga mga masters. So another example is ang Manson family nga founded naman ni Charles Manson. So ang some or most of the followers gidyan ni Charles Manson ya mga young women. Gina-instruct ang followers yan kill kasi believe nga ang murders would provoke the race war. Tapos gapati man ang mga young women na reincarnation siya kuno ni Jesus Christ, kag ginagapati man sila nga race war kuno was coming. So next slide please. Okay, so this will be reported by Nike.
Okay, so next we have the psychosocial dimension of cults. So as mentioned gani kagina, going back sa mga pinaka first na slides, isa sa mga ginahimo sang cult groups is that sa going back sa elements, no, gina-breakdown kanila psychologically and gina-build kanila in the manner that they want you to be built. And that is to someone who abides by their principle, and someone who has, of course, the same idea or ideology and the way of thinking as them. Kag to do that, hindi na siya effective against people who are mentally sound and mentally healthy. Kay if you notice kagina, sa NXIVM, this is actually one of very interesting nga story, no? Which is ang ilang nga grupo or ang ilang nga ginatanyag nga products are actually for self-improvement classes nga they called ESP, or the or the Executive Success Program, which means tuod na manggarano na sila, and even if they are accomplished na sa ila field, kay ti iban mga artista na, mga heiress, or somebody who is high profile, pero the fact nga they sought or they're seeking for improvement means that there is something that that is lacking within them. And amo na siya gali, that is an invitation now for cult groups saying okay, this someone is someone who is vulnerable, and that's the kind of people that these groups actually prey on to. So we have here the four the psychosocial dimension of cults, no. We have the first, we have societal problems. It says here that a number of people join cults as a way to escape a reality plugged with an insurmountable that does not seem to have a solution. Some cults guise themselves in a manner where they claim to have an answer to societal problems in order to lure members to join the movement. So this is number one, gid. Common reasons nga nag-join ang mga tao sa kulto. So there are people nga there are people nga damo-damo sang problems in the world individually. They've experienced a lot of problems kag isa gani sa mga ginapakita sa mga cult groups is that they have the answers to the problem of the world, diba? Going back sa elements kagina, we have the answers to the problem, sunda lang ang lubok ni pastor, and you will be fine. So muna, people, hindi man sila or hindi man naton sila matawag na weak-minded, but those na troubled, no? In a sense nga mentally anxious sila because of the problems that they have, and because wala na sila sang choice. Especially nga ang mga cult members daan, ang mga cult groups, sweet talkers man sila, especially gid ang mga heads and leaders. And So what they do, or what happened, is that they launch unto that, since they are the people possess nga they have the answers to all the problems in the world. Kay like for example, ako be as a person, may problema bi ako, ti masulod ko di sa guro sa ila, sa ila group, kay hambal gani nila, they all have the answers to the world. And that is where it starts na, nga kung baga kung baga naka-foot in the door na sila, na all they have to do is to open the door wide and get inside na lang, kay nakabutang gani nga ang some cult groups ginaguise nila ang ila selves, where they claim to have again an answer to societal problems in order to lure members nan. And then so what happened is that ginabutong kanila pasulod, and once ara ka na sa sulod, they break you down and build you up to the point nga yawan ka nagwa. And then for the second dimension, we have the low self-esteem. So it says here that cult groups targets people who have low self-confidence. They will needlessly and endlessly compliment people who have low self-esteem so as to program them to want more compliments from the group. And in turn, these people will knowingly join the cults simply because due to the fact that other members make them feel good about themselves. So for low self-esteem, so ang mga tao nag-join sa cult groups, especially those persons who have low self-esteem. Or hindi man gid siya majority, kay may ara man nag-join nga hindi low self-esteem. Only that they were born into a society nga laganap gid man ang cult groups, or ara na daan existing inside a cult groups. So wala na sila sang choice but to be a member. Pero kung outsider naman niya sa grupo, isa sa mga ganatan-aw daan sang mga cult groups is, does this person have low self-esteem? Because if yes, kung she or he has a low self-esteem, then it is easier to target that person nga mag-intra sa ilang nga cult groups. And then hambal these slides, like for example, idayaw-dayawan kanila, being nga like, ay, kagwapa, balasi mo, kasagad, balasi mo magkanta. And after that, gali, they will going to invite you nga like, kadto ka bala sa service naman sa Sunday. Tapos, ikaw naman, somebody who have low self-esteem will be caught in those good words. Kaya diba hamba ko gani kagina, these cult members are sweet talkers man. It will increase your self-esteem, and ang mga tao nga to nga mag-join, they feel like they're valued. So ultimately, without knowing it gali, they become members of the group. And only to realize later on nga ang mga nga ang ilagin joinan, or ang mga cult groups balaan, they do not brand this initially as cult groups. Nga like for example, una pa lang nga meet sa imo, like hambalon ko, hello, ako gali si Mikey, party ko gali isang isa ka kulto nga grupo. Party ko sang, I'm one of the member of cult groups. But they do not do that. Wala nila gina-brand ang ilang nga group initially. Wala man na nila then also ginapakita nga okay, we have these elements. Wala man na nila ginapakita una-una nga ang mga elements nga to, especially gid sa mga prospective members. So parang hindi man siya traidor kung tawgon. Only that parang ginamask lang nila. Ginamask lang nila. And meron na siya term deceitful parang mapanlin lang. That's it for the low self-esteem. Next slide, please. Next, for belongingness. Some people simply join cults for the reason that they want to belong to something. Usually, ang mga tao nga ni who have few friends or families or the one who are being misled into joining cult groups. And at times, specific tools are used to encourage to individuals to join the cult, such as having a women-only circle with which one can sign up for. So as mentioned earlier, cult groups prey on people who are actually emotionally and mentally unstable, or those na may mga problems, low self-esteem, low confidence, and have a tons of problems. Kag these people gani are the one who seeks belongingness, nga like I wanna belong with people, with some group, kay per me lang kuya alone, wala ko ga belong sa society, and wala ko friends. So some join these cult groups because they want to belong, or something na wala sila friends, or ang ila family is distant sa ila. Kag again, ang mga cult group ini, ang wala nila gina-brand initially ang ilang group as kulto. Instead, they're just a band of people who has the same kinds of interests, who shared the same kind of faith and beliefs. So, ikaw, somebody who wants to belong, will of course easily be seduced into becoming member of the group. So like, for example, gusto ko tani maging member sang women owning a group kay say I wanna campaign for something. So, ano yung maon ko is ma-join ko sa ila group. Next, we have purpose. According to Dr. Spellman, ambal niya, some people are hoodwinked into joining cults for the reason that it offers people who are struggling for a meaningful life into having a purpose. And usually, ang mga tao nga ni are frustrated with their personal shortcomings and failures and are tricked into joining cults as it gives them a new purpose in life, no matter how wrong, misguided, or even cynical. So for the purpose, uh, alongside that belongingness, there is purpose gid. Kay they want to have a purpose, they want to have a meaningful life, and these people has beliefs. Kay ti ang belief nila do kanami man pamatian, ang mga beliefs ng cult group do kanami man pamatian, miski daw hindi man kompleto ang gina-explain nila sa akon, pero do na namian kung mumati sa ila ginapatihan. So, maintra ko sa ila group because I wanna belong kag at the same time, I have something to consider, or I have something to be passionate about. So that's for the psychosocial dimension. For the psychosocial dimension. Next slide, please. Ari Pagid, this is very interesting, no? Hambaldi, in an HBO documentary series, ang The Vow, which looks into the sex cult of NXIVM, naging discuss ni Zyla kaina. Um, People who are lured to join a cult are not initially presented the whole information about group. Instead, information are given selectively and slowly up until a point that the person becomes dependent on the cult and will have a hard time leaving. So this is the part naman yung ginhambal ko nga people who are lured to join cults is not initially presented the whole information. Going back liwat sa NXIVM, isa sa mga ginahimo nila dire is first phase, they break you down. They program your mind to be aligned sa ilang principles, ideas, and beliefs of organization. And sa ulihi, they will make you group sa secret woman of the organization. So Hambaldi, instead, information are given selectively and slowly up until a point that the person becomes dependent on the cult and will have a hard time leaving. So may man actually iba na they wanted to leave early pero they do not know how, especially liwat, balik kita sa elements ng cult na some groups, ang ginahimo nila is they required members to like, okay, you stop kung gaskwela ka, stop ka, kung gaubra ka, stop ka man, and you can make your life. Hambalin sa ilagad kagina, you cut your life from your parents, from your family, from your friends, and sa imo community, and you join the community of the group. And there is no specific trait patterns that make someone susceptible to cult groups. There are several factors why some people fall into joining cult groups. So under this one naman,
those who are susceptible are actually those people who wants to make themselves better personally and professionally, because to a certain extent na they have a bit of insecurity. I mean, they want a greater sense of community, like they want to belong. And there are those naman who are in extreme vulnerability, like they have low self-esteem, they feel like they don't have purpose in life, no one around them na mag-back sa ila, so muna they feel vulnerable. So when cult groups come in, most of the time daan ang mga members hindi ni silang nagapalapit sa cult group. Instead, they are targeted or they are just identified sa mga grupo kag ginaistura-istura nila, and they will just eventually join the cult groups. And then this Bernstein advances as the mixture that often led someone to be more vulnerable to become members of cult groups. Kay individually daan lain-lain man balaan ang mga case nga why did you join cults, iban lain man ang reason, pero generally amo ni sa mga factors ang four kagina nga na mention as explained pagid further ni Rachel Bernstein sa The Vow, The Vow, VOW nga documentary. Bali si Rachel Bernstein is amo ni siya gali ang counselor and ang therapist nga naka-based sa US. And ang iyang specialization are those na halin gid sa cult groups tapos nagwa. Kay di ba sa US daan damo-damo gid sa cult groups ang mga ga-operate. Na next slide please. Sige, next slide please. Okay, next. This is also very interesting, no? Nga aga stay sila, why they stayed. So in a 2017 study, nga nag-interview sila sa mga tao nga nag-separate na sa cult groups. So one factor nag-insight why people join cult is, di ba we talk about kung nga aga nga nag-join sila. Pero kag wala man itaan gina-reveal, di ba, tanan nga information. Pero after revealing tanan nga information sa ila, kag nag-gets na nila nga this is not the organization gali I wanted, this is basically something which is beyond my understanding sang ilang grupo, and ano ni siya gali, kulto ni siya gali, cult groups ni siya gali. Pero nga nag-stay sila sa grupo despite those reasons, knowing nga kulto na sila, pero nga stay sila. So there are number one na factor nga nag-stay sila is di ba naghambal ta kay na nga people who join cults are dependent sa mga leaders or becomes dependent sa cult itself. Kag when they become dependent sa leader, they develop this inability to question the belief, like the ideas and the values sa grupo. Kay sa ilang mindset is okay lang nga amo ni basta ari lang kami sa grupo, kay before wala man ko yung friends, kay nagsulod na ko diri damo na ko friends, may na family pa ko, and wala man ko kag they become acclimated gali with the group itself, regardless of how bizarre or sinister man sang ilang mga practices nga ginahimo. And then it says here that another factor based on the influence of having relationship with other cult members or even with the cult leader. This includes family relationship, romantic relationship, or simply being dependent on the cult members or even the cult leaders. So for this one, relative sa amo ni nga study, so tungod kay na-orient ka na sa amo na nga grupo, kag napasama ka na sa ilang cycle, kumbaga, like ang ilabi nga mga rituals nga ginahimo, and once you become part of that, you come to develop this temporary dependency sa organization. And that's actually the dilemma sa mga members, no, nga while ang desisyon nila sa pagsulod sa group is a personal journey nila, well, ang pagwa manila sa organization is also more tragic and more exhausting personal journey man. And then Moreover, another reason why many cult members find it hard to leave their groups, apart from dependence, is their precariousness of the world outside of the group. The fact that some of those who commit to the cult quit their studies or jobs only magnifies the level of their precariousness with the outside world. So, amo to ganing hambal ko kay na nga, when most of the cult groups, gina-force kanila to cut your ties with your friends, with your families, resign ka kung may work ka, stop ka sa school kung ga-school ka, and focus ka lang sa group. And ginatudoan sila to like shun the outside world. Nga, okay, that's not ideal, diri sa sulod sa amon nga cult group ya, amo na yung ideal, amo na yung ideal nga world ya, kay miyara kami diya food, this is where we belong, and this is where all the answers to be found. So muna, because of that, they become hesitant na to leave the cult group and go back to a place na ginview nila as something hindi ideal, when in the first place gali, what is not ideal is their membership to the group itself. Now, next slide. This one naman, why they leave. So the same 2017 study, common reasons na nag-leave ang mga members are commonly linked sa cultic group and the relationship with members and or with the cult leaders. So with this, the former relates to the fact na that people leave cults due to the lack of faith with the creed of the cult. So, di ba, isa sa mga factors na nag-state sila is they have relationship with cult leaders sa group. Pero, that can also be factor why people leave. Number one, they leave because they have lost a faith with the faith system of the group. And while the latter relates to the contradictions of the cult leaders, conflicts the hierarchy of the group and loss of a hierarchical place. So for example, that can also be a factor like contradiction sa mga leader. Example, nag-inaway sila sa leader ng kulto. So they leave because kay na sila, kay nag-inaway na sila. That also can be a factor. Second, we have disagreement in the hierarchy. Like for example, tinga aya leader gin promote mo si Muna nga, di ba, mas friends ta, di ba dapat ani ako gin promote mo, na the second reason. And also, apart from that, again, it's losing faith with the ideals that initially invited them to the group. So relative man no sa 2017 and 2008 na study nga nagahambal nga common reason ko no why people leave cults is number one. Here we have witnessing and acknowledging contradictions between groups. Na example, they say sa aton nga ginapatihan ang preaching amuni, tapos ang ginapatihan kag ginahimo naton is lain. So balik kumbaga hindi siya consistent ang aton nga beliefs and faith kag principles sa aton mga actions. Na that's also one of the reasons na nag-leave sila. Number two, they have a personal conflict with the doctrine. So ultimately, na-realize nila nga, okay, while nagsulod ko di sa grupo, trying to look for a purpose, sa una do nami man, pero nga atubong daw hindi na. There's something amo na. And at the same time, disillusionment. Diba, I mentioned kagina nga, isa sa mga pakagat sa mga cult groups is that they have all the answers to the world. Kay isa sa mga reasons nani why people join this group is they have problems, conflicts, societal problems, and they have something that they want to address. And ma-address lang na nila if they join cult groups because gani naga-promise ang cult group na ay kung magsulod ka di sa amon group ni Ara, gid kami answer sa iyong mga problem. Next. Sige, next slide please. Next, we have the effects of joining cult to the individual. So, studies show that while some people would ultimately want to leave cults initially during the early instances of joining the cult group, some of them actually felt minor psychological relief while joining a cult. So to a certain extent, there is something gali nga positive man sa ila experience sa pag-join nila sa cult group. Like for example, dire 45% ko no that they interviewed have mood disorders prior to their commitment to the cult group. So sa hindi pa sila kuno members, 45% of them have mood disorder. Tapos this number drops to 35.5% sang naging member na sila sa cult groups. So nagnubo gid man during their membership. Pero this would also increase after their departure. So them leaving actually magnifies their mood disorder. Pero again, this increase can be attributed actually sa membership nila sa cult because they won't have this kind of mood disorder had it not been their exposure to the dysfunctional scheme and cycles ng cult group. And then, contrarily, however, data shows that anxiety levels of interviewees increased from 51.6% prior to their commitment to the cult to 58.1% during the membership. So significantly, this number would continue to rise to 61.3% 1 year after their separation to the cult. So which means that the effect of joining cult groups sa individual is relative to their anxiety levels is that gapasaka siya after they leave the cult group. Next slide, please. So next is okay, guys, ba't yun ang gaulan di sorry gid. So next is ang theories related to psychology of cults. So first is the social identity theory. It was proposed in social psychology by British psychologists Henry Padgeville and John Turner. So this theory states that our social identity within a group shapes our norms, attitudes, and behaviors. Humans have the need to have a positive self-concept which is presented through identification with our groups, meaning humans are motivated to positively evaluate their own groups and value them over the groups. So, kumbaga, the individual sees the group as an extension of themselves. Gina-state dire nga may ara nga positive self-identity based sa in-group kag out-group. So, therefore, nag-seek sila sa social identity kag attributes nga naga-distinguish ng ilang nga in-group from out-group in a positive way. For example, ang cult, of course, if mangkuton mo sila, kung kulto sila, syempre like what Mikey said, hindi nila ba i-brand self nila nga cult. Remember nga, di ba, ang cult, weird and bizarre. So, nagahatag ni sa ila sa negative group concept. So, to keep a positive group concept, nag-maintain sila sa positive self-concept. So, ang member, mahambal sila nga, this is not a cult, this is a religion, or this is a school of thought. So, they will do away with the negative terminology kag i-replace nila sa positive one. Kag sa social identity theory, hindi na siya something nga foreign or do ka artificial or kanabaw lang nga attachment sa isa ka tawo. Kumbaga, real na siya, true and vital part of the person. Next is ang self-categorization theory. It was also developed by John Turner and his colleagues at the University of Bristol. States that self-categorizations are motivated by the need to reduce uncertainty. So this theory states that members of groups will reduce uncertainty or cognitive dissonance about any concept by seeking affirmation of their beliefs from members within the group. So, diri naman yung theory, ang group member feels even more part of the group if naga-share sila sang same ideologies and ways of thinking. So, making those not in the group shunned. Kag ang theory nga ni naga-create sang clear division in groups sa others. So, kumbaga, they make in groups for anyone within the circle and out groups for anyone who is not. When members have the questions about topics such as, for example, be happiness, life, or love, syempre ga-seek sila answers within the cult. So naturally, ang answer nagahalin sa ideology from the cult. Kag kung may parehas sila sabat sa mga major questions, of course, they essentially become the entire group's ways of thinking. Kag ang wala nag-match sa ila thinking, become members of the out group. So
In conclusion, ang social entity theory nag-introduce sa way of explaining intergroup behaviors, particularly ang discrimination sang in-group members against out-group, kumbaga us versus them. So self-categorization theory naman niya, nag-focus siya sa individual who tend to categorize themselves into certain psychological groups. Kumbaga kung may gina-share sila nga parehas values and interpretations. Next slide, please.
So for the trend, we will going to find out if the Church of Kiboloy or Kiboloy is kulto siya or hindi. May ara kung may send sa nga link sa Meet, if you can open it. Of course, we will go back sa elements we can discuss kina if paano natin ma-identify if a group or a person is kulto or not. For the other link there, there is tatlo lang siya ka-elements. Ang i-use natin if i-identify if kulto si Kiboloy or not. So number one, ginahambal that ni Robert Lifton na charismatic leader. So check si Kiboloy. Kaya di ba may charismatic leader hambal da who increasingly becomes the object of worship. And I think this is very essential if we talk about Kiboloy. Kaya di ba hambal gani ni Kiboloy siya kuno ang son of God, siya kuno mapirma sang clearance naton pakadto sa langit. So I think with that part, check si Kibuloy. Next, we have number 2 of the process of indoctrination, which is true naman kay Kibuloy nga kay kung panahon ta, majority of them na mga members ng iya church, Kingdom of Jesus Christ, they live a kind of life na daw same lang man with other religion. But we have to also note na tanan nga members ng group nila is 24 hours on call kay Kibuloy, and there is that control. So that means na all throughout their lives, they are disciplined to follow a set of rules kag develop this kind of mindset nga the same sa ila group, sa ila church. And then number 3 there sa link is kulto siya if there's a presence of economic, sexual, and other group exploitation of other members by the leaders. So this is true naman with the case of Kibuloy presented this slide. Hambal ni Robert Lifton, cult siya if there is a presence of economic, sexual, and other exploitation of the members. Like example, sa case ni Kibuloy sa California, that they are being forced to work, they are forced to baligya sa mga puto, and gina-force man sila nga magbeg sa street kag ang mga funds or ang mga kwarta nga makuha nila is ginapanghatag ni sa mga coffers ng ilang church. So that's an example of economic exploitation. So kung identify naton si Kibuloy if his church is kulto or not, then to a certain extent using these elements or using this guide, we can say good man na Kibuloy is actually kulto or they have cult groups. Sige, next slide. Sige, next. Sa conclusion. So, the conclusion, to fear or not to fear, the belief is exhibited in multiple ways in the community. A strong and common interest in something allows people to come together and celebrate what they believe, may it be a matter of social ideology, interest, or even spirituality and faith. However, this may not be automatically meant that such is a cult. Second, in gauging if a group is good or bad, to be feared or not, accepted or shunned, proper delineation and assessment must be made to identify if it is a cult. Consequently, if it is, does it exhibit violent and alarming practices? And lastly, a difference in ideology does not automatically cancel out other people's belief unless by nature they are both illegal and or immoral.
Okay, so thank you very much, Group 3, for your presentation. So before we end, I would like to ask a few questions sa inyo. So anyone from the group can answer. So um, for you, so over the course that you were researching for your topic, so what do you think are what parts of your research have surprised you, or what have you learned from researching from your topic?
So, ako na lang muna, ma'am.
Okay.
So in this particular topic, especially sa psychology of religion, so I realized nga dako ang influence ng religion sa isa ka person and sa kadamuon sang religion na gina-practice sa bilog nga kalibutan. Lain-lain man nga klase sang values or set of belief ang aton nga na-acquire, and this somehow became part of our personality man in terms of paano kita mag-view sa mga bagay-bagay or paano kita mag-respond sa isang situation. And sa report, and I just learned man kagina nga there is a certain part gali sa aton nga brain nga naga-fire or naga-lit up when we talk about religion, which is very interesting.
Mm-mm. Okay. Sige. How about your other group mates? Sige,
Ako, Miss.
Ay, wait lang. Si
Eh,
Emil, ano?
ang...
Nag-raise
sige,
hand
sige,
si
Miss.
Emil. Sige,
Sige ma'am,
Emil.
sige ma'am, si Zayla naman naman.
Okay, sige, okay. Sino mauna sa inyo?
Sige. Sige, ako na lang, Miss. Ako, Miss, while nag-search ko, Miss, about sa cults, like, before, abi ko ang ga-join lang niya sa cult. Kay siling ko, do mga kademonyuhan lang wala, Miss. But then, sang nag-ubra na ko about sa report namon about sa cult. So, kumbaga, may mga reasons man gali ang iban nga tawo nga ga-join siya sa cult. Kag, do kaano lang bala, Miss, nga mostly sa reasons is about gidya, Miss, sa may related ya sa mental health issues gidya bala, Miss. Amo na nga ang iban kumbaga dira nila gakakita bala, Miss, nga ang acceptance nga napangita nila sa society biskan biskan sa ulihi, Miss, mabalaan nila nga may mga consequences kag ano gidya gali, Miss, may damo gidya bala, Miss, ang hindi manami nga matabo sa cult, pero kumbaga kay dira nila na feel, Miss, nga ang acceptance kumbaga naga-join nilang sila amo na gid girl na ano ko, Miss, do na learn ko gid samtang ga over sang report.
Okay, sige. How about you, Emil?
Sa ako naman, ma'am, in terms of religion and faith, ma'am, may mga certain members kaya sa kada religion, mga maskin despite the situation, wala, ma'am, grabe sila mag-stick sa ila tradition kag sa faith nila, bala. Nga maskin may COVID, iban ga-attend gid sa mga mass gatherings gyapon kag ang ila ano faith tamag sila ka faithful nga muna sa ila tradition kag sa religion.
Okay, anyone else who would... Okay, sige, Mikey.
Yes, ma'am. For the kulto, same with Saila, one na realization. Sang una daan, ang mga kulto, ang mga cult groups, makita ko lang siya sa mga TV. Nga, ang mga ginapagawa lang is, like, may mga ritual sila. Pero when you try to look deeper, gali, with the help of study, of research, I've come to realize nga, ang mga reasons, gali, nga aga join ang mga tao sa cult is more on the psychological part na they wanna belong to something, gusto nila makita ila purpose and makita nila through joining the group. No, amo na ako na-realize, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else who would like to add? May hambay ka pa, Mikey? Nag-raise ka na lang,
Okay na, miss.
Okay. Sige, so sa ako na. Ang ako naman yung takeaways from your presentation is that there are really dangers when it comes to when you make a certain doctrine dogmatic bala. When you say dogma, buslingo do katamaan, inflexible na ang belief mo on a certain thing, and of course ang dangers of mga charismatic leader. That's why actually man gani it's really amazing man nga the Bible already talked about mga false teachers who will thrive. If you notice, 'di ba, most of the cults are using Jesus as their way to recruit people. But if you look into deeper into their doctrine, so very layo siya. So onto what the Bible really says. So that's why man, if kita, Christians kita, 'di ba? That's why we are commanded by God to read the Bible because read His Word because dara kita naton mabalaan kung ano ang tudtuod nga doktrina ng Christianity compare mo sa mga false nga mga religions and false belief na naguguluwa man. And hambag ko gani ara gid na iya sa Bible nga nagambal gid si tiga niya many will call his name. Okay, many will say nga Christian sila, many will say na they believe in God, pero when you look at their behavior, when you look at their heart mismo, they are far away from Him. And yeah, and I think this is also a reminder for us, especially those in the Christian faith, na we really need to go back to what He said. We really need to not only practice the rituals, not only practice it, but meditate gidya in His Word. So another thing that I learned ban from the past nga nag-presentation sa 1317 ang isa ka section sa ila naman niya, cults are not only religious but they can also be a political belief or an ideology. So amo lang gina, that's why what I said sa inyo man, balik kita sa previous nga lessons ang last week nga just be careful with what ideology or what ideology that you are subscribing in. Try to look deeper. Although we can say nga the idea is good, but let's look into how they are what is their ideology behind it, and also what ano ang mga ways nila, 'di ba? Ang this how do the way they talk about that certain political belief or issue, 'di ba? Mga narratives, how they frame it, 'di ba? So it's a very divisive kaya nga time gidya. So some people are using religion against certain people, 'di ba? But for me, okay, if you are a truly genuine believer gidya, you know what is the truth, and to know the truth, 'di ba, you must seek God. Kung ikaw ang tutod nga, kung oo. Sige Miss Mentolan, I will just note na you are present. So yeah, just be careful lang gid on those beliefs. So may mga lang gan isa sa Christianity mga prosperity gospel bala, 'di ba? So be careful kita na. So ang prosperity gospel gahambal nga if we really believe in Jesus Christ, ang ilang philosophy or belief that God will give you wealth, will give you health, 'di ba? Health and wellness. So damo-damo na sa mga America, and not only in America but since Americans also colonized as may-ari man di sa Philippines, that are using prosperity gospel as their major doctrines in their Christian faith. So kung like I said, if we really wanted to increase our faith, if we really wanted to know the truth, so balik gid kita sa Bible. So that's why it's also a reminder for us to also study why do we believe what we believe in. So anong mga arguments sa about the validity of the religion na we are subscribing in. So may ang tawag sa gani is apologetics. So hindi na siya hindi na siya related sa mga Marcos apologista. So ang apologetics is the study of the arguments about your religious faith or or doctrine. So not may difference man 'di ba ang religiosity sa spirituality. So again, I'm just saying be careful man sa mga gambang spiritual sila because we also know that demons are also spirits. So amo lang ang mga takeaways ko from religions and cults nga na-learn ko man from the past mga reporters and sa inyo man. So yeah, so thank you Gid very much Group 3 for your presentation. So let me check na lang your attendance before we go. So stop ko na ang recording.